Subpart E, a133 circular 500 scope of audits. Generally, the audit should be conducted in accordance with the GAGAS audit. They shall cover an entire operation for the auditee. At the opinion of the auditee, such audit shall include serious audit cover to department agencies, other organization units which expend other departments, agencies, other organization units which exposed or otherwise administered federal awards during the fiscal year, providing that such an audit shall encompass the financial statements, schedules of expenditures, federal awards of such department agencies, other organizational units considered to be non-federal. At need, the financial statement and schedule expenditures of federal awards should be of the first fiscal year. Financial statements, the auditor shall determine whether the financial statement auditee of the presently fairly in all material respect of the conformity generally accepted accounting principles. The auditor shall determine whether the schedule of expenditures of the federal award is present and fairly in all material respects of the relationship to auditee's financial statement and take as a whole. See the internal control. In addition to the requirements of the GAGAS, the auditor shall perform procedures to obtain the understanding of an internal control of other federal programs sufficient to plan the audit to support a low assessed level of control risk for the major program. Except for as provided in C3 of this section, the auditor shall plan the testing of the internal cover over the major programs of the support of lesser or assessed level of the contract or risk of the assertions, revelation, compliance with the requirements for each major program. 2. And perform testing of internal control as planned in the paragraph to C2.1 of the section. When the internal control over the same of all the compliance requirements of the major program, all likely and effective the preventing the detecting non-compliance, the planning, performing the tests prescribed in paragraph C2 of this section are not required for the compliance requirements. However, the auditor shall report significantly deficiencies, including whether any of such conditions of material weakness in accordance with 510 S the related control of the maximum considered with the additional compliance with the test required for the ineffective internal control. Compliance in addition with the requirements of the GAGAS of the auditor's determination with the audit shall comply with the laws, regulation, provision of the contract, grants, of the agreements that may have direct material effect of the major on each of its major programs. The principal compliance requirements applicable to the most federal program compliance requirements for the largest federal program are included in compliance supplement. For a compliance requirement related to the federal programs containing compliance supplement, the audited compliance requirement with the requirements of this part, whether there has been change to the compliance requirements and change is not reflected in the compliance for supplemental. The auditor shall determine the current compliance requirements as modified by the audited procedures according to the federal programs not covered in the compliance supplement. The auditor shall use the type of the compliance requirements contained in the compliance supplement to guidance identifying types of compliance requirements for the testing determination requirements governing the federal program, reviewing the provisions of the contract, grants, agreement, laws, and regulations referred to in such contracts and grant agreements. The compliance testing shall include testing of the transactions such as auditing procedures necessary to provide auditors sufficient evidence to support an opinion in compliance. An audit follow-up. The auditor shall follow up on prior audited findings before performing procedures to assess responsibility for the summary schedules of the primary adult audit findings prepared by the auditee of the accordance to the 315B of the report of the current year of the finding. When the auditor concludes the summary of the schedule of the prior auditing findings misrepresents the status of either any of the prior audited findings, the auditor shall perform an audit following the procedures regardless of whether the prior audited finding relates to the major program of the current year. A data collection form is required by the 320B3. The auditor shall complete with the signing specified sections of the data collection form. Audit reporting. The auditor report may be in form of either combined and separate reports and may organize differently the manner represented in the section. The auditor reports that shall complete the audited conduct with this part includes the following: an opinion to disclaimer option, whether the financial statement is presented fairly to the material respects of conformity, generally accepted accountability principles, options, and disclaimers of opinions, as whether the schedule of expenditures of the federal award is presented fairly in a material respects in relation to the financial statements is taken as a whole. A report of the internal control related to the financial statements, major programs. The report shall describe the scope testing, internal control, the results of the testing where applicable. Refer to the separate schedule findings, questions, costs described in paragraph D of this section. Reporting compliance with the law, regulation, provisions of the contract agreements, non-compliance in which could have a material effect of the financial statements The report shall also include the opinions and disclaimers whether the auditee complied with the laws, regulations, provisions of the grant, contracts of the grant agreements, and they could have direct material effect of each measure program where applicable. Refer to the separate schedule of the finding question costs described in paragraph D of this section. D. A schedule of findings question cost which shall include the following components. A summary of the auditor's results shall include 1. A type of report of the auditor is issued by the financial statement of the auditee, unqualified opinion, adverse opinion, and disclaimer opinion. Where applicable, a statement of the significant deficiency, internal control, a disclose of the audit financial statements whether any of the conditions of material weakness. A statement to whether the audit closes in compliance with the material financial statements auditee, where applicable, statement of the significant deficiencies, internal control over the major program were discussed as the auditee, whether any of the such conditions or material weaknesses. 5. A type of report that the auditor issued with the compliance with the major program, unqualified opinion, qualified opinion, adverse opinions, and disclaimer opinions. A statement whether the audit discloses any of the audited findings of the is required to report the 510 and identification major programs. The dollar threshold distinguishes between type A and type B of the programs described in 520B, and a statement is whether the auditee is qualified in low risk under the 530 in this with the GAS findings for awards, which shall include the audited findings of 510A. Audited findings, internal control findings, and question costs and frauds which relate to the same issue presented with a single audit finding of the practical audit findings shall be organized as a federal agency pass through entity 2. Audit findings which relate both financial statements of federal awards and reported in paragraphs D2 and D3 of this section, respectively reported as full sections of the schedule. Reporting of this section scheduled may be in the summary of the reference to detailed reporting of the other section of the schedule. Audit findings 510. The auditor shall report the following of the audited findings in the schedule of the findings in question. Significant deficiency in the internal control over the major programs and auditor determination of whether the deficiency, internal control is significant deficiency. Purpose of the reporting audit finding is in relation to the type of compliance requirements for the major program, other audit objectives, and identification compliance supplement. The auditor shall identify significant deficiencies where the individual cumulative material weakness, material non-compliance provisions, laws, regulations, contracts, grants, agreements related to the major program. The auditor determination whether the compliance with the provisions of the law, regulations, contract, grants, agreement is material for the purpose of the reporting audit, defining in relation to the type of the compliance requirement for the major program, or an audit objective, identifying compliance supplement. 3. Knowing the known question cost, whether greater than $10,000 for the compliance with requirements for the major program. Non-question cost is specifically identified by the auditor. Evaluating the effect of the question cost of the opinion of non-compliance, the auditor considers the best estimate total question likely question cost, not just the question cost specifically identified. Now, only question costs, the auditor shall know the question costs would likely cost are greater than $10,000, the type of the compliance requirements for the major program, and report question costs. The auditor shall include the information provided the prospective judging in prevalence and the consequences of question costs. 4. Knowing question costs of greater than $10,000, federal program is audited except for the audit file. The auditor is not required to perform the audit procedure such as the federal program. Therefore, the audit will normally find the question cost for a program which is not audited a major program with the auditor does not become aware of question costs for a federal program which is not audited a major program, e.g. as part of the audit follow-up other than audit procedures. Known question costs are greater than $10,000. The auditor shall report in an audit finding the circumstance concerning with the auditor reported on the compliance of the major programs unqualified to less than circumstances otherwise reported in audit findings and schedules and findings and question costs of the federal awards. 6. Knowing the fraud action of the federal award unless the fraud otherwise reported by the audit findings schedule the findings of the question cost of the federal awards. The paragraph does not require the auditor to make an audit reporting when the auditor confirms the fraud was reported outside of the auditor's report under the direct reporting of the report in the GAGAS. And since with the result of the audit follow, disclose a summary schedule of the prior audit findings prepared for the auditee according to 315B. The material represents the status of any of the prior audit findings. B. Audit finding detail. And audit findings in which shall be presented in significant detail to the auditee to prepare current or active action to take the corrective action and the federal agencies pass through it needs to arrive at the management decision. The following specific information shall be included as applicable in audit findings. 1. The federal program specific federal award identification number, the federal award number, the name of the information, name of the federal agency, name of the applicable pass-through entity. When the information such as the CFD and number of the federal award number is not available, the auditor shall provide the available to describe the federal award. The criteria specific requirement when the audit financing is based on including statutory regulatory citation. The condition found in the in-fact supports the deficiency in identification audit findings. In identification question costs, however, they were computed the information proper to the proper prospective judge and prevalence conquesting audit findings as whether the audit findings represent the isolated instance of systematic problem where the appropriate instance is identified shall be related to the universe and related to the universe and the name of the case examined and qualified in terms of dollar value. 6. Possible asserted to be provided with sufficient information auditee federal agency provides through any in the case of the subrecipient to put the determination cause the effect on the faculty to prompt the proper corrective action. 7. Recommendation preventing the future occurrence of the deficiency identified in audit finding with the responsibility of official auditee whether the disagreement audit findings are the accepted practical. See reference numbers. Each of the audit in the schedule of findings of the questions cost shall include the reference number to allow for each of the referencing of the audit findings during the following follow-up. 515 audit working papers. Retention of the working papers. Auditors shall retain the working papers reporting the minimum of 3 years of the date of the issuance of the audit reports to the auditor unless the auditor is notified the writing of the cognizant agency for the audit or the oversight of for the audit or pass-through entity to extend the retention program. The auditor is where the federal award agency passed through the entity the auditee to contest of the an audited finding. The auditor shall contact the parties contesting the audited findings granted prior to the destruction of the working papers and reports. The access to work papers. Audits of work papers shall be made available to the work upon request of cognizant oversight agency's audit and its designee federal agency provides direct and indirect of the government accounting office completion of the audit and the quality review to resolve the audit findings to carry out oversight responsibilities consistent with the purpose of this part. All access to the work papers include the right to the federal agencies to obtain copies of the work papers and responsibility necessary. 520 major program determinations. Generally, the auditor shall have the risk-based approach to the determination of federal programs as a major programs. The risk-based approach that includes consideration current prior audits experience oversight of the federal agency path through any inherent risk of the federal program pass through the E&I of this section and shall be followed. Step 1. The auditor shall identify the large federal program shall be labeled in the Type A. The Type A is defined in federal programs with the 4 federal awards expanding during the audit period exceeding the larger of $300,000, 3% of the total federal awards expended for this case of the audit shall, for which the federal awards expended the actual exceed $300,000, but are less than equal to $100 million. $3 million or 3/10 of the 1% of the total federal awards expended in the case of the audit shall, which include federal awards expending over $100 million or less than equal to $10 billion. 3. The $30 million of 1/1500 of 1% of the total federal awards expand in the case of audit, which in total federal awards expanded to exceed $10 billion. 2. The federal programs not labeled in Type A. The paragraph B of the section shall be labeled in Type B programs. This inclusion of large loan programs loans shall not result in the exclusion of other programs of Type A when the federal program providing the loan significant effects of the name of the size of the Type A federal programs. The auditor shall consider the federal program Type A. The program excludes its values and determination of other type of the program. 3. The biannual audit permits under the 220, the determination of Type A and Type B shall be passed on before federal awards during the 2-year period. Step 2. The auditor shall identify Type A program, which is a low-risk Type A that shall be considered low risk. It shall have been audited as a major program at least one of the 2 most recent audit periods. In the most recent audit period, in the case of the biannual audit, and its most recent annual part shall have no audited findings under 510 of this section. However, the auditor shall be judgment consider the audit findings in the question of 510A and 510A4 and 510A6. Audit follows up the summary schedule financial period audits risk under audit 510A7, precluding type A program for being the following risks. The auditor shall consider the 525C, 525D1, 525D2, 525D3. The result of the audit follow-up program with any of the changes to the personal system, the type of the A program, significant increase in any professional judgment determination with the type A of the low risk, notwithstanding C1 of this section of the Office Management Budget Federal Awarding Agency requirement requests that the type A program certain applications not to be considered low risk. For example, a necessary large A type of the B audited major each of the particular recipients, federal agency to comply with the government management form of 1994 for the federal agency shall notify the recipient and auditor at least 180 years prior to the end of the fiscal year of the audit of the Office of Management Budget approval. Step 3, the auditor shall identify the type of the which are the high-risk professional judgment criteria of 525. However, they should audit select the option 2 of the step 4 of the paragraph of the E2 B of this section. The auditor shall not require the identifying the higher risk of the type B programs, not the number of low risk type of the A programs, except for the number of significant deficiencies, internal control, compliance program problems discussed in 525B and 525B2, 522C1. The single criteria of the 525 seldom the type B program considered high risk. That the auditor shall is not expected to perform risk assessment relative to small federal. For therefore, the auditors are only required to perform risk assessment type B of these each of the larger of $20,000 or $100,000 at 0.3% of the 1% of the total federal awards. If the audit has less than equal of $100 million in total federal award expended, $300,000 or $300% of the total federal awards. When the audit has more than $100 million in total federal expended. Step 4, minimum auditor shall audit all the following of the major programs. All type of the A programs except for the auditor exclude the type A with the lower risk of the step 2, the C1, paragraph C1 of the section. However, the high risk of the type B programs identified under either of the following two options. A, option 1, at least 1.5 of the type B identified in the highest risk under the step 3, paragraph D in this section, except for the paragraph E2, 1A, it does not require the auditor to audit more than a high-risk type B program number of the lowest type A programs identified in low risk in Step 2. B, Step 2, on a high-risk type of the B programs and type A programs identifying low risk under the Step 1, identifying with a high risk to the type B programs out of the major under the opinion of option of 1, 2, and the E2, 1, and B, the auditor is encouraged to approve or the provided opportunity with different high-risk type B programs audited as major over the period of time. Such an additional program is necessary to comply with the percentage of the coverage rule discussed in paragraph F of this section of the paragraph E3 that required for the auditor to audit more than as much of the type of the A program. This percentage of the coverage rule, the auditor shall audit the major programs with the federal awards expended that aggregated encompassing at least 50% of the total federal awards. If the audit meets the criteria of 530 of the lowest auditee, the auditor needs only to audit the major programs, federal programs, and the federal awards expended in the aggregated encompassing at least 25% of the total federal award expended. Documentation of risk, the auditor shall documentate and work in the working papers of the risk process determination programs. H, the auditor's judgment when the major program determination performed the documentation in accordance with the part of the auditor's judgment applies to the risk approach to determination of the major program shall be presumed corrective challenge of the federal agency path through any shall only the clear impose the improper use of the guidance of this part. However, the federal agency path through the entities are provided that the auditor's guidance and the risk of the particular federal program. Auditors should consider the guidance and determination of major programs and audit that is not yet completed. Deviation from the use of the criteria for the first year of the audit, the auditor may elect to determine major programs of type A, plus any of the type programs necessary to the percentage of the coverage rate rule discussed in paragraph F of the section. Under the option of the auditor would not be required to perform the procedures discussed in paragraph C, D, and E of this section. 1. In the first audit of the first year is the entity of the audit under this part the first year of the changes to audit. 2. The insurance frequent change of the audit will not preclude audit high-risk type B programs. The election of the first year of the audit may be audited more than one of the first 3 years. 525 criteria for the federal program risk. In general, the audit determination shall be made based on overall evaluation risk non-compliance occurring with it could be the material federal program. The auditor shall do judgment and consider the described in paragraph C, B, C, and D of this section. Identifying sections paragraph also part of the risk analysis The auditor which also discuss particular federal programs with audit management and federal agency pass through any of the current prior audit. The experienced weakness of internal control of the federal program indicated high risk. Consideration shall be given in cross-environmental federal programs such as federal factors of examination, expectation management, adherence to applicable laws, regulations, provisions, contracts, agreements, and competence of personnel who administer federal programs. The federal program administered with a multiple intra-control structure with a higher risk assessing the risk of the large single unit auditor shall consider the weaknesses are insulated with the operating unit, e.g. one college campus, perhaps throughout an entity. 2. When a significant part of the federal programs are passed through the subrecipient, weakest system of the monitoring subrecipient indicated highest risk. 3. The extent of which the computer processing is used to administrate the federal programs as well as complexity of the processing should be considered the audited assessing risk of the recently modified computers as indicated in the risk. 2. Prior auditings will indicate the higher risk, particularly when the situation identifying the auditing could have significant impact on the federal program and have not been corrected. Federal programs most recently audited as a major program may be higher the risk of the federal programs recently audited for the major program. The audited final exercise federal agencies pass through entities oversight exercise federal agencies pass through entities could indicate the risk. For example, recent monitoring reviews performed oversight entity disclosed non-significant program problems which indicate lower risk. However, the monitoring disclosed significant problems would have indicated higher risk. For agencies with occurrence with the office management budget, identifying federal programs at the higher risk of the office management budget to provide the identification with compliance supplement. D. Inherit the risk of federal program. The nature of the federal program indicate the risk consideration should be given the complexity of the problem. The program, the extent of the federal program contracts for goods and services. For example, federal programs that disperse funds for the third-party contracts eligibility criteria may be of higher risk. Federal programs primarily involve staff payroll costs may be high risk for time and the effort of the reporting, otherwise at low risk. 2. The phase of the federal program in its life and cycle of the federal agency indicating a risk. For example, a new federal program with a new interim regulations may higher risk for the established program with the time-tested regulations. Significant change in federal program laws, regulations, provision of contract grants agreement may increase the risk. For the phase of the federal program in its life cycle, auditing may indicate the risk. In the first and last years of the auditee participate in federal program, the risk may higher due to the startup, the closeout program activities. Type B, the programs of large federal awards expanded for the low, be it by higher risk program, the substantial awards expanded. C, criteria of low audit and auditee, which means in all the following conditions on each of the preceding 2 years. In the case of the biannual audit, in preceding 2 audit periods should qualify as low-risk auditee eligible for reducing audit coverage in accordance with 520 in this circular. Signal audits performed on an annual basis in accordance with the provision of the part non-federal entity. The biannual audits does not qualify as low-risk unless agreed in advance by the cognizant oversight of the agency audit. B, the auditor's opinion, financial statement, and scheduled expenditures of federal award were unqualified. However, the cognizant oversight agent for audit may be judged for that an opinion qualification does not affect the management of the federal awards provided with a waiver. There were no deficiencies in internal control with the identified major weaknesses under the requirements of the GAGS. However, the cognizant oversight of the agency may judge the identified material weaknesses do not affect the management of federal awards provided by a waiver. And finally, the last page, D, none of the federal programs have an audit findings by any of the following, either the preceding 2 years, and in the case of the biannual audits, preceding 2 audit periods in which the classified in Type A programs internal control deficiency, which identified and material weaknesses. 2, non-compliance provision laws, regulations, contracts, grants, agreements for material effect of the Type A program, federal known and the like questions, which exceed 5% of the total awards expended in Type A program during this during the year. Appendix A, Part 1, Data Collection Form, and the Form SAAC inserts the SSAC for finalized. Appendix Part 2, Circular a133, Compliance Supplement, Provision Off Management Budget Compliance Supplement is available to the Office of Administrative Publications of Room 2200, New Executive Office Building, Washington, D.C. 20503.